George Orwell wrote this novel in 1948 and its title was reversed, 1984, as a message as a prophecy of the state of the world in the coming years if it is ruled and dominated by tyrannical governments with totalitarian regimes. In the novel, the writer tries to depict the life of peoples ruled by the proletarian government. A proletariat is a political system followed by governments that fear the consciousness of peoples and who want to control the simplest details of individuals' lives by monitoring their food, drink, social relationships, and even their emotions down to their thoughts. The writer chose London as the city in which to apply this concept, portraying it as a gloomy ghost town where individuals live deprived of will and dignity and devoid of all feelings or tendencies, ruled by a tendency of loyalty to the ruling regime subconsciously, indifferent to their living conditions, which have reached the degrees of decadence to live with the unpleasant odors that fill the atmosphere. The writer has chosen the smell of moldy boiled cabbage as an example of it. Orwell is content to depict the only semblance of luxury in London with pyramidal government buildings. All the city has is the majestic government buildings. Orwell described the proletarian government governing London in his novel, which is represented by the ruling party with the three slogans that he packed in the heads of the people: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is power, and with a person whose symbol or leader is called Big Brother. However, it was a government that instilled terror in the souls of the people, by depriving them of any freedom they could enjoy, as it was planting surveillance screens in the streets, parks, buildings, even on stairs, inside houses, and bedrooms so that an individual could not come up with any movement without being under the control of the ruling party. For whatever reason, any offense led to arrest. The phrase "Big Brother is watching you" was always repeated on every screen and everywhere, and the image of the chairman of the ruling party Big Brother was on all screens. As for the work of that government, it was limited to monitoring individuals, arresting and torturing them even without the slightest knowledge of the individual. Because of his arrest, the only crime for which anyone was prosecuted was the crime of treason. The thought police were the ones who carried out this work. The thought police were also responsible for monitoring the personal relationships of individuals. Any social, emotional, or sexual relationship was an offense that might lead to arrest, in order to provide the individual's energy to work only to serve the party, its ideas and principles. The government of the leader's party was composed of 4 ministries that share the government apparatus, namely the Ministry of Truth, which ostensibly specializes in news, culture, entertainment and fine arts, but in fact it falsifies facts and invents lies, falsifying or hiding the past, or distorting what is stated in foreign newspapers or what is stated in history books, changing and amending it, tearing up what it does not want to reach the people. The second ministry is the Ministry of Love, which reconciles people to torment, opposes sexual relations with the absolute and claims that it is she who maintains law and order. The third is the Ministry of Peace, which is responsible for war affairs and weapons. The fourth ministry is the Ministry of Abundance, which deals with starving people. The party's policy has always imposed on the people to celebrate the so-called 2 minutes of hatred or 2 minutes of hatred, where a character was displayed on the screens representing the character of Emanuel Coldstein, the enemy of the people who is hated by the people, so that he is a traitor to the homeland without the people knowing him, and yet they curse and hate him, and this is one of the customs imposed on the public among the offerings of obedience. Winston Smith is the main character of the novel, a 39-year-old civil servant in the Ministry of Truth, forced by the policy of the ruling party to live the monotonous life that Londoners lead, so he is lonely without friends or even a girlfriend. He even hated women. This tendency appeared when Smith committed the first crime punishable by the laws of the ruling party, namely, buying a book and a pen in order to write, because reading, writing, or owning any book other than the party's books that carry its principles is a crime punishable by law. But Smith did not complete his crime and did not dare to write down any idea that was in his mind. However, Smith's rebellious streak remained buried inside him, without daring to say anything about it or do anything to reveal the truth of his thoughts. He hated attending the 2 Minutes of Hate show, but he had to so that the thought police would not drive him away and get arrested, and Winston detested Big Brother and was disgusted by the rallies, party chants, and obedience to him. Smith was exposed by a party member, who was an employee of the Ministry of Truth named O'Brien and who was at the same time a member of the internal organization of the party, where he was able to deceive Smith and convince him that he was not convinced of the principles of the party until he signed Smith and revealed his rebellious tendency. Meanwhile, Smith had begun a secret romantic relationship with Julia, who works with him at the same place and who bore Smith's rebellious streak, contrary to what he expected from her. During the period of their work together, he felt a strong hatred towards her, and the reason for this hatred was caused by his admiration for her beauty and his conviction that he would not be able to get close to her, because this is forbidden according to prevailing customs and party policy. In addition, she wears a scarlet scarf, which indicates an anti-sex league, until Julia confessed her love to him by surreptitiously putting a piece of paper in his hand on which she wrote "I love you." So the relationship between them began and developed until they were able to meet and practice the full details of the beautiful emotional relationship. O'Brien was implicating Smith by various means, convincing him that a revolution would be launched against the party and offering him books against party policy in order to drag him and Julia further, until they ended up in prison in the Ministry of Love as a result of O'Brien's tip about them, where forms of torture and humiliation begin for each of them. In order for Smith to survive all this torment, he was required only to love the big brother, but the investigators convinced him that they were able to detect his lie, and O'Brien was contributing to the torture of Smith himself and took advantage of the weaknesses of Smith that he knew during their alleged friendship until he reached his end by smashing Smith once and for all when he brought a cage filled with mice and wanted to put Smith's head inside him. Knowing Smith panics until he asks Oberyn to torture his lover instead of him and give Julia food for the mice instead, at which point Oberyn realizes that he has succeeded in decapitating Smith, thus turning him into a slave. Spaniel no longer poses any danger to the party, the government and the big brother and will be like the rest of the rabble in the country. Smith and Julia were released. They came out to life as the dead who breathe, eat, drink and serve only the party, and their love story and any tendency within them to love or freedom ends. And Smith, convinced himself that he had triumphed over himself, he fell in love with the big brother.